The sound of hooves thundered behind her as Hazel Zimmerman urged her exhausted mare forward, the golden horizon of Wyoming territory stretching endlessly before her. Blood trickled down her arm beneath her torn sleeve, a painful reminder of what and who she'd left behind in Chicago. The year was 1878, and Hazel knew that if she didn't find safety soon, she might not live to see 1879. "Just a little farther, girl," she whispered to the chestnut mare, her voice nearly lost in the howling prairie wind. According to the weathered signpost she'd passed hours earlier, Silver Peak was less than 5 miles ahead. 5 miles between her and salvation, or at least a temporary reprieve. When Hazel had boarded the westbound train 3 days ago with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small satchel of belongings, and the jewelry she'd managed to grab, she'd had no destination in mind. All that mattered was distance from Edmund Thornton, the powerful Chicago businessman whose ring she'd once worn and whose violent temper had nearly cost her life. The mare stumbled, and Hazel clutched the saddle horn to keep from falling. She'd purchased the horse at the last train stop with nearly all the money she had left. Now, as Silver Peak finally appeared on the horizon, little more than a collection of wooden buildings fighting against the vast emptiness of the Wyoming plains, Hazel felt the first genuine hope she'd experienced in weeks. As she approached the town's main street, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dusty road. Businesses were closing for the evening, lamplight glowed in windows as people retreated to the comfort of hearth and home. Hazel's stomach twisted with hunger and exhaustion. She dismounted with shaking legs in front of a building with a sign reading Silver Peak Hotel and Saloon. Her dress, once a fashionable blue traveling ensemble, was now dust-covered and torn. She knew she looked desperate because she was. "Can I help you with your horse, miss?" Hazel turned to find a young boy, no more than 12, looking up at her with curious eyes. "Yes, thank you," she managed, her throat parched from the journey. "Is there a livery stable nearby?" "Yes, my pa runs it. I can take your horse there. It's 2 bits for the night with feed." Hazel reached into her pocket and retrieved one of her last coins. "Please tell your father to take good care of her. She's carried me a long way today." The boy nodded earnestly and took the reins. As he led the mare away, Hazel gathered her courage and stepped into the saloon, ignoring the stares that followed her. She approached the bar where a round-faced man with a bushy mustache was polishing glasses. "I need a room," she said quietly, "and information about work in town." The barkeep looked her over with skeptical eyes. "Rooms 50 cents a night paid in advance. As for work," he shrugged, "town's small, not much call for fancy ladies from back east." Hazel flushed. "I'm not," she stopped herself, realizing explanations would only invite questions. "I can cook, clean, so I'll take any honest work." A voice spoke from behind her. "Mrs. Patterson at the general store lost her shop girl last month, married a miner and moved to Montana Territory." Hazel turned to find a tall man watching her with thoughtful blue eyes. His weathered face suggested he was in his early 30s, and the small child perched on his hip, a boy with matching blue eyes and tousled brown hair, marked him instantly as a father. "Thank you," Hazel said, offering a tentative smile. "Owen Quinn," he introduced himself, shifting the sleepy toddler to his other arm. "This here's my son, Matthew. He's just turned 3. The little boy blinked at her before burying his face in his father's shoulder. "Hazel Zimmerman," she replied, purposely omitting any mention of where she'd come from. "I appreciate the information, Mr. Quinn." Owen nodded. "Mrs. Patterson opens at 7. She's particular but fair." His eyes flickered to the blood on her sleeve. "Town's got a doctor too, if you're needing one." "I'm fine," Hazel said quickly, though the cut on her arm throbbed painfully. It had been Edmund's parting gift, a slash from the letter opener she dodged only partially when she'd finally gathered the courage to leave him. "As you wish," Owen replied, his expression suggesting he didn't believe her. "Good evening to you, Miss Zimmerman." As he carried his drowsy son out of the saloon, Hazel paid for her room and followed the barkeep up a narrow staircase. The room was small but clean, a far cry from the opulent Chicago apartment she'd shared with Edmund, but mercifully free of fear. She sank onto the bed, allowing herself tears for the first time since her escape. Morning came too quickly. Hazel had spent a restless night, starting at every sound, convinced that somehow Edmund had tracked her to this remote corner of Wyoming. She rose before dawn, washed in the basin provided, and did her best to make herself presentable in her only remaining dress, a simpler green cotton that thankfully showed less of the journey's wear than her blue traveling outfit. Mrs. Patterson, a thin woman with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, examined Hazel with critical eyes when she arrived at the general store promptly at 7. "You have experience in retail?" she asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "No," Hazel admitted. "But I learn quickly and I'm not afraid of hard work." The older woman's lips thinned. "Can you figure sums in your head, read an invoice, deal with difficult customers without bursting into tears?" "Yes to all three," Hazel answered firmly. After further questioning that felt more like an interrogation, Mrs. Patterson reluctantly agreed to hire her on a trial basis. $2 a week, and you'll sleep in the room behind the store. I open at 7 and close at 6, except Sundays when we're only open until noon. You get 1/2 day off a week, but never on Saturday, which is our busiest." The wages were meager, but the arrangement included lodging and meant Hazel could save nearly all her earnings. More importantly, working in the town's general store would allow her to learn the community quickly, who could be trusted, who should be avoided. "Thank you," Hazel said, sincerely grateful. "I won't disappoint you." Over the next 2 weeks, Hazel settled into a routine. She rose early each morning to sweep the store and restock shelves before opening. She learned the inventory rapidly and proved adept at keeping the account book skills honed during her years at the girls' finishing school, where Edmund had first spotted her at a donor's event. Mrs. Patterson, while never warm, became less critical as she observed Hazel's competence. The customers, initially curious about the newcomer, gradually accepted her presence. Hazel was careful to be pleasant but reserved, offering nothing about her past while listening attentively to local news and gossip. She saw Owen Quinn occasionally when he came to town for supplies. He always had Matthew with him, sometimes perched on his broad shoulders, other times trotting alongside, clutching his father's hand. Unlike other men in town who either ignored Hazel or eyed her with unsubtle interest, Owen was unfailingly polite, asking after her welfare with what seemed like genuine concern. On a Wednesday afternoon in her 3rd week in Silver Peak, Hazel was organizing a new shipment of fabric when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up to find Owen entering alone, his hat in his hands. "Good afternoon, Mr. Quinn," she greeted him. "What can I help you with today?" Owen cleared his throat. "Miss Zimmerman, I've got a proposition for you if you'd care to hear it." Hazel tensed instinctively, her mind flashing to the many propositions Edmund had made before she'd finally agreed to be his mistress, a decision that had led to 2 years of gilded misery. Seeing her discomfort, Owen quickly continued. "It's about work, honest work. My ranch is 10 miles outside of town. I've been managing with just me and my foreman since my wife passed during Matthew's birth, but it's getting harder as the ranch grows. I need someone to help with the house and with Matthew." He twisted his hat in his hands. "The town talks. I know Mrs. Patterson only gives you half of Wednesdays off and the pay can't be much. At the ranch, you'd have your own cabin, all meals provided, Sundays entirely to yourself, and $3 a week." Hazel stared at him, calculating swiftly. More money, better accommodations, and a place further from town, further from the chance that someone passing through might recognize her from Chicago. "What about Matthew?" she asked cautiously. "I don't have much experience with children." "He's a good boy," Owen said, a flash of fatherly pride crossing his face. "He needs a woman's influence, though, someone to teach him manners and such. My mother helped until last year, but her health took her back east to live with my sister." Hazel hesitated. The offer was tempting, but she'd fled one man's control only weeks ago. "I'd still be able to come to town sometimes," Owen nodded. "Of course. We come in most Saturdays for supplies, and if you're not happy with the arrangement, I'd bring you back, no questions asked." After a moment's consideration, Hazel made her decision. "I would need to give Mrs. Patterson notice." "Naturally," Owen agreed, relief evident in his expression. "Would a week be sufficient? I can return next Wednesday to collect you and your belongings." That would be fine, Hazel said, already mentally composing what she would say to her current employer. Mrs. Patterson was predictably displeased when Hazel informed her of the change. Quinn's offering you more money, I suppose, she said bitterly. Well, I won't compete with a man who owns half the cattle in the county. It's not just the money, Hazel explained. It's the opportunity to help with his son. The older woman sniffed. Just be careful out there. 10 miles is a long way from town if you find yourself in difficulties. Hazel understood the implication and bristled. Mr. Quinn has been nothing but a gentleman in all our interactions. Men are always gentlemen until they're not, Mrs. Patterson retorted. Remember that. Despite the warning, when Owen arrived the following Wednesday with a wagon to transport Hazel and her few possessions to the ranch, she felt more anticipation than apprehension. Matthew sat beside his father on the wagon seat, clutching a wooden horse and regarding Hazel with solemn curiosity. "Hello, Matthew," she said gently. "Do you remember me from the store? I'm going to be helping you and your father at the ranch." The little boy nodded, then held out his toy. "This is Thunder," he said seriously. "He's the fastest horse in Wyoming." "He's beautiful," Hazel replied, matching the child's gravity. "Thank you for introducing us." Owen chuckled, the sound warming something in Hazel that had been cold for too long. He helped her into the wagon, his hands strong but careful, then climbed up himself and took the reins. "It's a fair drive," he warned as they set off, "but I think you'll find the ranch worth the journey." The road took them through rolling grasslands dotted with sagebrush and the occasional stand of cottonwoods marking a creek or spring. Owen pointed out landmarks as they traveled: distant mountains, neighboring ranches, a rock formation shaped like a sleeping bear. Matthew fell asleep against his father's side, and Hazel found herself relaxing in the peaceful landscape so different from Chicago's crowded streets. "May I ask what brought you to Silver Peak?" Owen inquired after they had been traveling for some time. "It's not exactly on the way to anywhere." Hazel tensed, then carefully arranged her features. "I was seeking a change," she said simply. "The East didn't agree with me." Owen glanced at her, his eyes noting the scar that was still healing on her arm, visible where her sleeve had ridden up. "Some changes are necessary for survival," he observed quietly. The statement was neutral enough, but Hazel sensed he understood more than she'd said. Rather than feeling exposed, she found it oddly comforting that he didn't press for details. "The ranch has been in my family for 15 years, Owen said, changing the subject. "My father came west after the war between the states, started with 20 acres and a dozen head of cattle. Now we're running close to 1,000 head on 5,000 acres. Pride and a touch of weariness colored his voice. "It's good land but demanding, especially these last 3 years since Caroline died." "I'm sorry about your wife," Hazel said softly. Owen nodded, his jaw tightening briefly. "She was a city girl too, from Denver, never quite took to ranch life, but she tried. The pregnancy was difficult from the start." He looked down at his sleeping son. "She gave me Matthew, though. For that, I'll always be grateful." The conversation fell into comfortable silence after that. As they crested a rise in the late afternoon, Owen pointed ahead. "There it is, Quinn Ranch." Hazel leaned forward, taking in the view. A large 2-story house built of solid timber stood in a shallow valley surrounded by several outbuildings. A barn painted the traditional red dominated one side of a fenced yard, while corrals and a bunkhouse stretched to the other. A creek wound through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods providing welcome shade. In the distance, cattle grazed on the open range, tiny dark specks against the golden grass. "It's beautiful," Hazel breathed, genuinely impressed by the prosperous, well-maintained ranch. Owen smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "Wait until you see it in spring when the wildflowers bloom. Even the hardest cowboy can't help but stop and look." As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair visible as he removed his hat in greeting. "That's Jim Hawkins, my foreman," Owen explained. "Been with the ranch since my father's time, knows more about cattle than any man alive." Jim helped unload Hazel's belongings, his manner respectful but reserved. "The cabin's been aired out," he told Owen. "Maria from the cookhouse left some stew warming for supper." Owen thanked him, then led Hazel to a small but sturdy cabin about 50 yards from the main house. It was built for the ranch teacher years back when there were more families with children here, he explained as he carried her trunk inside. Has its own stove and pump. The interior was simple but comfortable, a main room with a small kitchen area, a bedroom just large enough for a bed and dresser, and a lean-to at the back that housed a metal tub for bathing. Someone had placed fresh wildflowers in a mason jar on the table and laid a colorful quilt across the bed. This is more than generous, Hazel said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the preparation. Maria's doing, Owen admitted. She comes 3 times a week to cook meals ahead and do the heavy cleaning in the main house. She's got her own family to care for in town, or I'd have hired her full-time years ago. He set Matthew, who had awakened during the last part of their journey, on his feet. I'll let you get settled. Supper's at 6 in the main house. Matthew can show you the way when it's time, can't you, son? The little boy nodded solemnly, clearly pleased with the responsibility. After Owen left, Hazel unpacked her few possessions, arranging her dresses in the dresser and placing her mother's silver hairbrush, one of the few keepsakes she'd managed to bring from Chicago, on top. She washed away the dust from the journey at the small basin, changed into her cleanest dress, and tried to tame her auburn hair into a neat bun. At precisely 10 minutes to 6, a knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find Matthew waiting, his face freshly scrubbed and his hair dampened in an attempt to control its natural cowlick. "Supper time, Miss Hazel," he announced, offering his small hand with a gravity that made her smile. "Thank you, Mr. Matthew," she replied with matching formality, taking his hand. "Please lead the way." The main house was impressive up close, built of squared logs with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Inside, the furnishings were solid and practical rather than ostentatious, though Hazel noticed several quality pieces that suggested Owen's success as a rancher. The dining room contained a table that could easily seat 12, though only 3 places were set at one end. Owen was waiting, looking somewhat uncomfortable in a clean shirt with his hair still damp from washing. "Welcome," he said, pulling out a chair for her. "I hope you found everything satisfactory in the cabin." "More than satisfactory," Hazel assured him. "It's lovely." Dinner was beef stew with fresh biscuits, simple but delicious. Matthew, clearly on his best behavior, only spilled his milk once, an accident that Owen handled with patient good humor, wiping up the mess without scolding. As they ate, Owen outlined what he hoped Hazel's duties would include. "The main house needs regular attention, dusting, sweeping, keeping things orderly. Meals when Maria isn't here, and helping Matthew with his letters and numbers. I've been trying to teach him myself, but there's often not enough hours in the day." "I'd be happy to tutor him," Hazel said, smiling at the little boy who was now fighting to keep his eyes open despite his obvious desire to appear grown up. "I'm quite comfortable with basic education." Owen nodded gratefully. "There's a small library upstairs with some primers and readers that belonged to my mother. She was a school teacher before she married my father." After dinner, Owen carried a drowsy Matthew upstairs to bed while Hazel insisted on clearing the table. When Owen returned, he found her washing the dishes at the kitchen sink. "You didn't have to do that tonight," he said, grabbing a towel to dry. "You've had a long journey." "I don't mind," Hazel replied. "It gives me a chance to learn where everything belongs." They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes before Owen spoke again. "Matthew seems to have taken to you already. That's good. He's been shy around strangers since his grandmother left." "He's a sweet child," Hazel said honestly, "very well behaved for his age." A shadow crossed Owen's face. "Sometimes I worry he's too well behaved, too serious. He should be running and laughing more, but it's just been the 2 of us for so long." "Children are resilient," Hazel assured him, "and he clearly adores you." Owen's expression softened. "He's everything to me. The ranch, the cattle, it's all for his future." As they finished the dishes, Owen showed Hazel where various household items were kept and explained the weekly routine. "Breakfast is usually at sunrise," he said. "I'm often out before then, but I try to come in to eat with Matthew." When all was explained, he walked her back to the cabin, a lantern lighting their way in the gathering darkness. Stars were beginning to emerge in the vast Wyoming sky, more than Hazel had ever seen in her life. "It's magnificent," she breathed, gazing upward. Owen followed her gaze. You can see why they call it Big Sky Country. Makes a man feel small, but in a good way. At her door, he handed her the lantern. Sleep well, Miss Zimmerman. Tomorrow I'll have one of the hands show you around the ranch proper if you'd like. I would thank you. She paused, then added, and please call me Hazel. A smile touched his lips. Hazel, then. Good night. That night, for the first time since her flight from Chicago, Hazel slept deeply and without fear. The following weeks established a rhythm to life on the Quinn ranch. Hazel quickly learned the household routines and added her own touches: fresh flowers on the dining table, curtains laundered and rehung, shelves organized more efficiently. Matthew eagerly embraced their morning lessons, showing a quick mind for letters and numbers. By the third week, he was proudly writing his own name and counting to 20 without error. Owen was often busy with ranch work, especially as autumn approached and preparations for winter became urgent. Cattle had to be moved to lower pastures, hay stored, buildings weatherproofed. Despite his responsibilities, he made time each evening to join Hazel and Matthew for dinner, listening intently to his sons' excited accounts of what he'd learned that day. On Sundays, when work slowed even on a working ranch, Owen would sometimes take them on rides to see different parts of his property. Matthew rode in front of his father on Owen's big bay gelding, while Hazel was provided with a gentle mare named Daisy. These excursions became highlights of her week, peaceful interludes of natural beauty and quiet conversation. During one such ride in early October, they stopped at a high meadow overlooking a winding creek. The aspen trees were turning golden, their leaves quivering in the light breeze. Owen spread a blanket on the ground, and they shared a picnic lunch packed by Hazel fried chicken, apple tarts, and lemonade. As Matthew explored nearby, carefully staying within the boundaries Owen had set, Hazel found herself studying her employer. The weeks of working together had revealed a man of quiet strength and unwavering principles. He was firm but never harsh, demanding of his workers but never asking more than he himself was willing to give. With Matthew, he showed endless patience and deep affection, though he was not demonstrative by nature. "You're staring, Hazel," Owen remarked without looking at her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. She flushed, caught. "I was just thinking how different life is here from what I knew before." He turned to face her then, his blue eyes serious. "Better or worse, different," she repeated. "Harder in some ways, but cleaner somehow, more honest." Owen nodded, understanding in his expression. Ranch life strips away pretenses. A man or woman is judged by their actions, not their words or appearances. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by Matthew's delighted exclamation as he discovered a family of rabbits hidden in the brush. The moment felt peaceful, perfect, and terrifying in its perfection. Hazel had begun to care for this man and his son more than was wise for a woman with secrets. As if sensing her sudden disquiet, Owen changed the subject. "The harvest dance is coming up in town, first Saturday in November. The whole county attends." "It sounds lovely," Hazel said, though her stomach tightened at the thought of a public gathering where she might be recognized. "I was hoping you would accompany us," Owen continued, watching her carefully. "Matthew enjoys the children's games and I—" He hesitated, then finished quietly, "I would enjoy your company." The invitation hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond a simple social outing. Hazel knew she should refuse for her safety, for the careful distance she'd maintained. Yet looking at Owen's face, open and hopeful, she couldn't bring herself to deny him. "I would like that very much," she heard herself saying. The smile that transformed his face made her heart skip painfully. "Good," he said simply, but the word carried a wealth of feeling. The days leading up to the harvest dance were filled with nervous anticipation. Hazel examined her limited wardrobe with dismay, finding nothing suitable for such an occasion. Her Chicago finery would have been inappropriate even if she'd been able to bring it, and her everyday dresses were serviceable but plain. Her dilemma must have been obvious, for 3 days before the dance, Maria arrived with a package wrapped in brown paper. "From the Señor," she explained, her dark eyes twinkling as she handed it to Hazel. "He asked Mrs. Langston at the dress shop to select something suitable." Inside, Hazel found a dress of deep burgundy cotton, simply cut but with tasteful lace at the collar and cuffs. It was modest yet flattering, the color rich against her fair skin and auburn hair. Wrapped separately was a matching ribbon for her hair. The thoughtfulness of the gift brought unexpected tears to her eyes. No one, not even Edmund with all his expensive presents, had ever shown such consideration for her actual preferences rather than their own vision of how she should appear. When the day of the dance arrived, Owen drove them to town in the wagon, Matthew chattering excitedly between them. The community hall in Silver Peak had been transformed with autumn decorations, golden wheat sheaves, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorning every surface. A local band played lively tunes while couples whirled across the wooden floor. Hazel felt eyes upon her as they entered, aware that speculation about her position at Quinn Ranch had likely been rife in town. Owen seemed oblivious to the whispers, proudly introducing her to neighbors and friends as Miss Zimmerman, who's been a godsend to Matthew and me. After ensuring Matthew was happily engaged in a game of musical chairs with other children, Owen turned to Hazel with a slight bow. "May I have this dance?" She hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I'd be delighted, though I warn you I'm out of practice." "That makes two of us," he admitted as he led her onto the floor. "I haven't danced since before Caroline fell ill." As the band struck up a waltz, Owen placed one hand respectfully at her waist, holding her other hand with gentle firmness. He moved with surprising grace for a man who spent his days on horseback, guiding her smoothly through the steps. "You dance very well for someone out of practice," Hazel observed, relaxing into the rhythm. "My mother insisted I learn properly," he explained. "Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a buffalo." Hazel laughed, a genuine sound that drew smiles from those dancing nearby. "She sounds formidable." "She is," Owen agreed. "You'd like her. She doesn't tolerate nonsense either." The simple comparison to his mother, a woman he clearly respected, deeply warmed Hazel in a way no elaborate compliment could have done. They danced several more times throughout the evening, with breaks to check on Matthew and to exchange pleasantries with townspeople. Mrs. Patterson sniffed disapprovingly when they greeted her, but even she couldn't maintain her frosty demeanor when Matthew solemnly presented her with a cookie he'd saved. "Because Miss Hazel says you work too hard to enjoy the party." As midnight approached, Matthew finally succumbed to exhaustion, falling asleep on a bench near the refreshment table. Owen gathered him up, the little boy's head lolling against his father's shoulder. "Time to head home," he said softly to Hazel. "Would you mind carrying our coats?" The drive back to the ranch was peaceful, Matthew sleeping in the wagon bed nestled on quilts while Hazel and Owen sat side by side on the seat. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead, the quarter moon providing just enough light to see the road. "Thank you for the dress," Hazel said after they had been traveling for some time. "It was very thoughtful." "You looked beautiful in it," Owen replied simply. "Though you'd look beautiful in sackcloth, I expect." The compliment, delivered without flourish or expectation, touched her deeply. Edmund's compliments had always been calculated, designed to elicit specific responses: gratitude, acquiescence, surrender. "Owen," she began hesitantly, "I should tell you there are things about my past that I've kept hidden." He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the road ahead. "We all have pasts, Hazel, some harder than others. When you're ready to share yours, I'll listen. Until then, it's who you are now that matters to me." The uncomplicated acceptance in his words nearly undid her. "And who am I now?" she whispered. He turned to look at her then, his face softened by moonlight. "You're the woman who's brought laughter back into my home, who teaches my son with patience and kindness, who works from sunrise to sunset without complaint." He paused, then added quietly, "You're the woman I find myself thinking about from the moment I wake until I sleep." Hazel's heart thundered in her chest. Owen, whatever she might have said was interrupted as Matthew stirred in the back of the wagon, mumbling in his sleep. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since her arrival at the ranch. When they reached home, Owen carried Matthew inside while Hazel gathered their things from the wagon. By the time she entered the house, Owen had already taken the boy upstairs to bed. She busied herself banking the fire in the main room, suddenly uncertain how to act in the wake of their conversation. Owen found her there, staring into the glowing embers. "He didn't even wake when I took his shoes off," he said with a fond smile, Too much excitement. It was a wonderful evening, Hazel agreed, keeping her voice steady despite the emotions churning within her. Thank you for taking me. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the chilly room. Hazel, he said softly, I meant what I said in the wagon. These past weeks with you here, they've changed things for me, for Matthew too. She looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. They've changed things for me as well. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, Owen reached out to touch her cheek. His fingers were calloused from work, but infinitely gentle. I'm not a man who speaks easily about feelings, he said, but I care for you, Hazel. More than I thought possible after Caroline died. The raw honesty in his voice broke something inside her, the careful walls she'd built to protect herself. I care for you too, she admitted. But Owen, there are complications. The past is behind us, he interrupted gently. I'm concerned with the present and hopefully the future. He leaned down, his intent clear, and Hazel made no move to stop him as his lips met hers. The kiss was tender, questioning rather than demanding, and she found herself responding with a warmth that surprised them both. When they parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. I should walk you to your cabin, he said regretfully. Yes, Hazel agreed, though leaving was the last thing she wanted. At her door, he kissed her once more briefly but with promise before bidding her good night. Hazel watched him walk back toward the main house, her fingers touching her lips in wonder at the turn her life had taken. The days that followed were filled with a new awareness between them. Nothing overtly changed in their daily routine. Hazel still managed the household and taught Matthew, while Owen attended to ranch business. But there were lingering glances, hands that touched longer than necessary when passing dishes at dinner, conversations that continued late into the evening after Matthew was asleep. One night in mid-November, as the first snow of the season dusted the ranch, Owen invited Hazel to join him in the library after Matthew was in bed. A fire crackled in the fireplace, and he had poured 2 glasses of red wine from a bottle he admitted he'd been saving for a special occasion. What are we celebrating? Hazel asked, accepting the glass. Owen sat beside her on the leather sofa, close enough that their shoulders touched. I received a letter from the railroad company today. They've agreed to my proposal for a spur line to connect to the main track. It means we'll be able to ship cattle directly from ranch land instead of driving them all the way to Cheyenne. Owen, that's wonderful, Hazel exclaimed, genuinely delighted for him. She had learned enough about ranching to understand what a significant advantage this would provide. It's a big step forward for the ranch, he agreed, his expression serious despite the good news. I've been working toward this for years for Matthew's future. He set his wine glass down and took hers, placing it beside his on the small table. Taking her hands in his, he met her eyes directly. Hazel, there's something I need to ask you. Her heart began to race, both anticipation and fear flooding her veins. Yes, these past months with you here have been the happiest I've known in years. Matthew adores you and I. He paused, squeezing her hands gently. I've fallen in love with you. The words, spoken with such straightforward honesty, brought tears to Hazel's eyes. Owen, please let me finish, he said quietly. I know it may seem fast. I know there are things in your past you haven't shared. But I'm asking if you could see a future here with me and Matthew, as my wife. The proposal, though not unexpected after the growing closeness between them, still caught Hazel off guard. Not because she didn't return his feelings, she had fallen in love with this honorable, hardworking man and his sweet son, but because she knew she couldn't accept without revealing the truth. Before I answer, she said carefully, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you weeks ago. Owen nodded, releasing her hands but staying close. I'm listening. Taking a deep breath, Hazel began the story she had kept hidden since arriving in Silver Peak. She told him about meeting Edmund Thornton at a charity event at her finishing school, how the wealthy businessman had pursued her relentlessly despite the 15-year age gap. How, orphaned and with few prospects beyond becoming a governess or companion, she had eventually succumbed to his promises of security and affection. He wanted me as his mistress, not his wife, she explained, unable to meet Owen's eyes as she spoke. He set me up in an apartment, gave me beautiful things, introduced me to Chicago society as his cousin to explain my presence. For a while, it seemed a fair exchange, my company and compliance for his protection. She described how Edmund's charming facade had gradually slipped away, revealing a possessive, volatile man who tracked her movements and punished perceived slights with escalating cruelty. The final night, he accused me of looking too long at a business associate during a dinner party. When we returned to the apartment, her voice faltered and she unconsciously touched the scar on her arm. He came at me with a letter opener. I managed to defend myself and lock myself in the bedroom while he raged. When he finally passed out from drinking, I took what I could carry and fled. Throughout her confession, Owen remained silent, his expression unreadable in the firelight. When she finished, shame burning her cheeks, she forced herself to look at him. "I would understand if you wish me to leave," she said quietly. "A man with your standing in the community can't be associated with a woman of my history." For a long, terrible moment, Owen said nothing. Then he reached for her hands again, his touch gentle but firm. "Did you love him?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Hazel shook her head. "I thought I might at first. Later I feared him. And now, are you still afraid?" "Yes," she admitted. "He's a powerful man with connections. If he found me, he won't." Owen interrupted, a hardness entering his voice that she had never heard before. "Not here. Not while I have breath in my body." He shifted closer, one hand moving to cup her cheek. "Hazel, what happened in Chicago doesn't change how I feel about you. You were young, alone, manipulated by a man who should have protected you, not exploited you. There's no shame in what you've told me, only in what he did." Tears spilled down her cheeks at his words. "But your reputation, my reputation, is my concern," he said firmly. "And anyone in Silver Peak who would judge you doesn't know the meaning of Christian charity." His expression softened. "The question isn't what others might think, Hazel, it's what you want." She looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity and love. "I want to stay," she whispered. "I want a life here with you and Matthew. I love you both so much it frightens me." Owen's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Then marry me," he said simply. "Be my wife, Matthew's mother, mistress of this ranch. Let me protect you, provide for you, love you as you deserve to be loved." "Yes," Hazel said, her heart too full for more elaborate speech. "Yes, I'll marry you." He pulled her into his arms then, his kiss deep and passionate, a promise of all that awaited them. When they finally parted, both breathless, Owen pressed his forehead to hers. "I was thinking Christmas," he murmured. "Unless that's too soon," Hazel laughed softly. Christmas would be perfect. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Silver Peak and the surrounding ranches. Most reactions were positive. Owen was respected in the community, and Hazel had proven herself hardworking and kind during her time in town. A few raised eyebrows at the relatively short courtship were silenced by Owen's quiet but firm assertion that when a man knew his heart, there was no sense in waiting. Matthew, when told that Hazel would be staying permanently as his new mother, responded with solemn consideration, followed by a question that made both adults laugh. "Does this mean I have to take baths every night now?" As Christmas approached, preparations for both the holiday and the wedding occupied most of Hazel's time. Owen insisted on ordering a proper wedding dress from Denver, brushing aside her protests about the expense. "I intend to marry you only once," he told her with a grin. "Let's do it properly." The dress, when it arrived 2 weeks before Christmas, was more beautiful than anything Hazel could have imagined. Ivory satin with delicate lace overlays, modest yet elegant. Mrs. Langston from the dress shop in town came to the ranch for final fittings, bringing with her a veil crowned with artificial orange blossoms. "You'll make a beautiful bride," the dressmaker declared as Hazel stood before the mirror in Owen's mother's bedroom, now temporarily hers until the wedding. And that little boy downstairs is beside himself with excitement. Indeed, Matthew had taken to the wedding preparations with enthusiasm, proudly announcing to everyone who would listen that Miss Hazel is going to be my mother for Christmas. The wedding was set for Christmas Eve, to be held in the small white church in Silver Peak, followed by a reception at the community hall. Owen's mother was traveling from back east to attend, along with his sister and her husband. Ranch hands and their families, townspeople and neighboring ranchers were all invited to celebrate. 3 days before the wedding, as Hazel was reviewing final arrangements with Maria, a commotion in the yard drew her attention. Looking out the kitchen window, she saw a fine carriage pulled by matched black horses stopping before the house. The driver, wearing a livery she didn't recognize, jumped down to open the door. A chill of premonition ran through her even before she saw the man who emerged tall, elegantly dressed in a city suit that looked jarringly out of place in the ranch yard. Though his back was to her, she would know that imperious posture anywhere. Edmund Thornton had found her. Hazel gripped the windowsill, her knuckles white, as Edmund approached the house. How had he tracked her here? Who had betrayed her whereabouts? The questions raced through her mind as panic threatened to overwhelm her. Maria, seeing her distress, touched her arm gently. "Senora, are you ill?" "That man," Hazel managed to whisper. He's from my past, a dangerous man." Understanding immediately, Maria's expression hardened. "The senor is in the north pasture with the men. I will send someone for him. You go upstairs, lock the door. I will tell this man you are not here." But it was too late. The front door opened. None of the ranch buildings were locked during the day, and Edmund's voice called out, "Hello, is anyone at home?" Hazel straightened her spine. Running and hiding had been her first instinct in Chicago, but this was different. This was her home now, and she would not cower within it. "Stay with me," she said to Maria, drawing strength from the older woman's determined nod. They moved to the front of the house together, entering the main parlor where Edmund stood examining the room with evident disdain. He turned at their entrance, his handsome face lighting with triumph when he saw Hazel. "My dear Hazel," he said smoothly, as if their last encounter hadn't ended with violence. "What an extraordinary chase you've led me on. Chicago to Wyoming territory, quite an adventure for a girl who once feared to cross Michigan Avenue without an escort." "What do you want, Edmund?" Hazel asked, proud that her voice remained steady despite the fear churning inside her. He smiled, the expression not reaching his cold eyes. "Why, to bring you home, of course. Your absence has been most inconvenient. My associates ask after you constantly." "This is my home now," Hazel stated firmly. "I'm not returning to Chicago with you." Edmund's smile tightened. "Don't be absurd. Look at you playing at being a frontier woman. This little diversion has gone on long enough." He took a step toward her, and Maria immediately moved to stand between them. "Senor, I think you should leave," the housekeeper said, her accent thickening with anger. Edmund regarded her with the dismissive glance he reserved for servants. "This doesn't concern you." "It concerns everyone at Quinn Ranch," came a new voice from the doorway. Hazel's heart leapt as Owen strode into the room, still in his work clothes, his expression thunderous as he took in the scene. Behind him stood Jim Hawkins and two other ranch hands, all watching Edmund with undisguised hostility. "And who might you be?" Edmund inquired, his tone condescending despite being suddenly outnumbered. "Owen Quinn, this is my ranch and you're trespassing on it." Owen moved to stand beside Hazel, his presence solid and reassuring. "I understand you're acquainted with my fiancé." Edmund's eyebrows rose. "Fiancé, you have been busy, Hazel." He turned his attention back to Owen. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Mr. Quinn. Hazel was my companion in Chicago. She left rather precipitously after a minor disagreement. I've come to bring her back where she belongs." "I believe the lady has made it clear where she belongs," Owen replied, his voice dangerously quiet, "and it's not with you." A flash of genuine anger crossed Edmund's face. "I don't know what tales she's told you, but Hazel was generously provided for in Chicago. Everything she had came from my generosity." "Including this?" Owen asked, gently touching the scar on Hazel's arm. Edmund's expression hardened. She was hysterical. "Accidents happen." "That wasn't an accident," Hazel said clearly. "You tried to kill me that night, and I will never again put myself in a position where you can try again." For a moment, Edmund's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing the rage beneath. "You ungrateful little," he caught himself, visibly regaining control. "I see you've allowed frontier living to coarsen you. Nevertheless, I've come a long way, and I won't be leaving without what belongs to me." "Hazel doesn't belong to anyone," Owen stated, stepping slightly forward. "Now I'm asking you politely to leave my property." Edmund's laugh was sharp and unpleasant. "Politely, how quaint. Perhaps you don't understand who I am, Mr. Quinn. I have connections from Chicago to Denver. One telegram and your precious railroad spur can be rerouted miles from here. Another, and your cattle might find themselves without buyers this spring. The threat hung in the air, but Owen didn't flinch. I imagine those connections might be interested to learn that you traveled all this way to threaten a woman who bears the marks of your violence. That you're willing to destroy a man's livelihood over a person you claim left after a minor disagreement. His voice remained level, but steel ran through it. How would that play in Chicago society, Mr. Thornton? Edmund's face flushed with anger. You have no idea what forces you're challenging. And you have no idea how we handle men who threaten women in Wyoming territory. Jim Hawkins interjected, his hand resting meaningfully on the gun at his hip. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Edmund's face as he glanced at the grim-faced men watching him. He had always operated in a world where his money and influence protected him from consequences. Here, those advantages meant little. This is absurd, he blustered. I came to offer Hazel the chance to return to civilization, to comfort and security, if she's too blinded by whatever this is. He gestured dismissively at Owen and the ranch house. To see reason, that's her misfortune. The only misfortune was ever knowing you, Hazel said clearly. I have everything I need here: love, respect, a future, things you never truly offered. Something ugly twisted Edmund's features. Love, respect, from a dirt farmer and his bastard. He never finished the sentence. Owen's fist connected with his jaw with a sickening crack, sending Edmund sprawling backward onto the parlor floor. Blood trickled from his split lip as he stared up in shock. That's the only warning you get, Owen said, his voice deadly quiet. Insult my son again and you'll leave this ranch on a stretcher. Edmund pushed himself to his feet, dabbing at his bleeding mouth with a handkerchief. His eyes were cold with hatred. You'll regret this, he promised. Both of you. The only thing I regret, Hazel said steadily, is not leaving you sooner. Goodbye, Edmund. For a long moment, Edmund stood frozen, unused to being dismissed. Then, with a final venomous glance at both of them, he stalked from the house. Through the window, they watched him climb back into his waiting carriage, issuing angry instructions to the driver. As the carriage pulled away, Hazel felt her knees weaken with relief. Owen caught her before she could fall, guiding her to a chair. He's gone, Owen assured her, kneeling beside her, and he won't be back. You don't know him, Hazel whispered. He doesn't give up easily. Neither do I, Owen replied, taking her hands in his. And I have something he doesn't, something worth fighting for. Jim Hawkins cleared his throat from the doorway. I'll have the boys keep watch, just in case, and I'll ride into town, let the sheriff know we had trouble. Owen nodded gratefully. Thank you, Jim. After the foreman and the other hands departed, Maria discreetly excused herself to the kitchen, leaving Owen and Hazel alone. I'm sorry, Hazel said, tears finally breaking free. I never thought he would find me here, never wanted to bring this danger to you and Matthew. Owen cupped her face in his hands. Listen to me, Hazel, you have nothing to apologize for, nothing. That man is the one who should be begging forgiveness from you, from God, from anyone with a shred of decency. He kissed her forehead gently. His appearance changes nothing between us unless you want it to. I don't, she said fiercely. I want to marry you on Christmas Eve. I want to be Matthew's mother. I want the life we've planned. The relief in Owen's eyes was profound. Then that's what we'll have, he promised. Edmund Thornton be damned. Despite Owen's confidence, the days leading up to the wedding were tense. Jim Hawkins organized the ranch hands into patrols, and Owen sent word to neighboring ranchers to be on the lookout for strangers. The sheriff in Silver Peak promised to keep an eye out for Edmund's return, though he admitted his jurisdiction was limited if no crime had been committed. Owen's mother and sister arrived as planned, 2 days before the wedding. Owen Quinn was a formidable woman with silver-streaked dark hair and her son's blue eyes. She sized Hazel up with one penetrating look before embracing her warmly. So you're the woman who's brought life back into my son's eyes, she said approvingly. Matthew hasn't stopped talking about you in his letters. The genuine welcome from Owen's family eased some of Hazel's anxiety, as did Matthew's excitement as Christmas and the wedding approached. The little boy had appointed himself special helper, solemnly carrying packages and decorations wherever directed and practicing walking very slowly for when I bring the rings down the aisle. On the morning of Christmas Eve, Hazel woke in her cabin to find fresh snow blanketing the ranch, transforming it into a glittering wonderland. The sight seemed like a good omen, a clean, fresh beginning for her new life. Owen's sister Catherine came to help her prepare for the ceremony, bringing with her the wedding dress and a small box from Owen. "He asked me to give you this while he's kept busy elsewhere," she explained with a smile. "Tradition says the groom shouldn't see the bride before the wedding." Inside the box, Hazel found a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When opened, it revealed a tiny photograph of Matthew on one side, the other side empty. A note in Owen's strong handwriting read, "For our future children to join their brother. All my love, Owen." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to her eyes. Catherine, seeing her emotion, squeezed her hand. "My brother has always had a good heart," she said softly, "but I've never seen him as happy as he is with you." The church in Silver Peak was packed with guests when Hazel arrived. Lanterns and evergreen boughs decorated the simple white interior, their fragrance mingling with beeswax candles. As she waited in the small antechamber for the ceremony to begin, Sheriff Davis appeared at her side. "Miss Zimmerman," he said quietly, "I thought you should know that gentleman who visited the ranch the other day boarded an eastbound train yesterday afternoon. My deputy in Cheyenne confirmed it." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you, Sheriff. That's very good news," he nodded, tipping his hat. "Congratulations on your wedding, madam. Quinn's a good man." The knowledge that Edmund had left Wyoming territory lifted the last shadow from Hazel's heart as she prepared to walk down the aisle. With no father to give her away, she had asked Jim Hawkins to do the honor. The weathered foreman, uncomfortable in his Sunday best, had accepted with gruff emotion. As the church doors opened and the small gathering rose to their feet, Hazel saw only Owen waiting for her at the altar, his face transformed with love and pride. Beside him stood Matthew, solemn in his new suit, clutching the small pillow that held their rings. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices clear in the hushed church. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes and appreciative murmurs from the congregation. The reception afterward was joyous, a celebration not only of their marriage but of Christmas Eve. Tables groaned with food contributed by neighbors and friends. Music from fiddles and a piano filled the community hall as couples danced and children played. Matthew, overtired but determined to stay awake for every moment, eventually fell asleep on his grandmother's lap, the excitement of the day finally catching up to him. As midnight approached, Owen found Hazel where she was speaking with Catherine and Mrs. Patterson, who had unbent enough to attend the wedding despite her initial reservations. "I think it's time to take our son home," he said softly, nodding toward the sleeping Matthew. "The hands have everything well in hand here." They said their goodbyes, accepting congratulations and well wishes as they made their way through the crowd. Owen carried Matthew to the waiting sleigh, tucking the little boy beneath warm blankets before helping Hazel up to the seat. With a final wave to their guests, they set off through the starlit night toward the ranch, toward home. The moonlight on the snow made the landscape glow with an otherworldly beauty. Hazel leaned against Owen's shoulder, his arms secure around her as the sleigh runners whispered over the freshly fallen snow. "Happy?" Owen asked quietly, pressing a kiss to her temple. "More than I ever thought possible," she admitted. "It still feels like a dream sometimes." "If it is, I don't want to wake," he replied, his voice husky with emotion. "I love you, Hazel Quinn." Her new name, spoken in his deep voice, sent warmth cascading through her despite the winter chill. "And I love you, Owen Quinn, with all my heart." When they reached the ranch, Owen carried the still sleeping Matthew inside, Hazel following with their packages. Together they tucked the little boy into his bed, his face peaceful in slumber. "Santa will come tonight," Matthew murmured sleepily as Owen pulled the quilt up to his chin. "Yes, son," Owen assured him, "and when you wake up it will be Christmas. And Hazel will really be my mother," the child persisted, his eyes fluttering open briefly to seek confirmation. Hazel leaned down to kiss his forehead. "I already am, sweetheart, I always will be." Satisfied, Matthew drifted back to sleep, a small smile on his lips. Owen and Hazel watched him for a moment, their hands finding each other in the dimly lit room. He's been waiting for a mother since he was old enough to understand what he was missing, Owen said softly as they left the room. I tried to be enough, but you were, Hazel assured him. You are. The bond between you is beautiful, Owen. He led her downstairs to the parlor where a fire still burned in the hearth. From a cabinet, he produced a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. A wedding gift from Jim and the Hands, he explained as he worked the cork free. They thought we might want to toast our new beginning. They settled on the sofa before the fire, glasses in hand. To my beautiful wife, Owen said, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Who brought light back into a home that had known too much shadow. To my husband, Hazel replied, emotion making her voice tremble slightly. Who showed me what love truly means. They drank, then Owen set aside their glasses and drew her into his arms. His kiss was different now, still tender, but with an urgency that hadn't been there before. Hazel responded in kind, her hands sliding into his hair as she pressed closer. Mrs. Quinn, he murmured against her lips, I believe it's time I showed you to our bedroom. Hazel smiled, happiness bubbling up inside her like the champagne they'd just shared. Lead the way, Mr. Quinn. The master bedroom, like the rest of the house, had been transformed by Hazel's touch over the past months. Fresh curtains framed the windows, a new quilt in shades of blue and green covered the large bed, and a vase of winter greenery sat on the dresser. But tonight, additional touches had been added. Candles in silver holders cast a warm glow, and someone, Maria, most likely had scattered pine boughs and red berries around the room, their fragrance fresh and festive. Owen closed the door behind them, then turned to Hazel with an expression that made her heart race. Slowly, reverently, he began to unfasten the buttons of her wedding dress, his fingers gentle against the fabric. I've imagined this moment more times than I can count, he confessed softly. But the reality of you here, as my wife, is more beautiful than any dream. As the dress slipped from her shoulders, Hazel felt no shame, no fear, only love and anticipation. This was nothing like her experiences with Edmund, where she had always felt like a possession being claimed. With Owen, she was a partner, equally desired and desiring. Later, as they lay tangled together beneath the quilt, Owen's heartbeat steady beneath her cheek, Hazel reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the frightened young woman who had fled Chicago with nothing but fear as her companion, to this a wife, a mother, a woman secure in the knowledge that she was truly loved. What are you thinking about so seriously? Owen asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. How strange life is, she replied. If Edmund hadn't. She paused, then continued more firmly. If I hadn't found the courage to leave Chicago, I would never have found you, never known this kind of happiness was possible. Owen pulled her closer. Sometimes the darkest paths lead to the brightest destinations, he said thoughtfully. Not that it makes the darkness any easier to bear at the time. They were quiet for a moment, listening to the winter wind outside and the occasional crackle from the fireplace. Then Hazel propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at her husband's face in the candlelight. I have a Christmas gift for you, she said, suddenly shy, though it's not something I could wrap. Owen's eyebrows rose questioningly. Oh. Hazel took his hand and placed it gently over her stomach. I suspected for a few weeks now, but I wanted to be certain before I told you. Maria confirmed that she's had experience with such things. Understanding dawned in Owen's eyes, followed by wonder and joy. A baby, he whispered. Our baby. Hazel nodded, tears of happiness spilling down her cheeks. Due in summer, Maria thinks. I hope you don't mind that she knew before you. I wanted to be sure before I said anything. Owen surged upward, gathering her into a fierce embrace. Mind. Hazel, this is the most wonderful gift you could give me. He pulled back to look into her eyes, his own suspiciously bright. A child, our child. Matthew will be so excited to be a big brother. I thought we might tell him tomorrow morning, Hazel suggested, as part of his Christmas. Owen nodded, then kissed her with such tenderness that fresh tears threatened. I love you, he said against her lips. Both of you. As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, Hazel felt a profound sense of peace. The past, with all its pain, could never be erased, but it no longer defined her. Here in this house, with this man and the children they would raise together, she had found something she had never truly had before: a home, a family, a future built on love rather than fear. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the ranch in a pristine blanket of white, a new beginning for a new year, a new life. And in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Hazel Quinn fell asleep in her husband's arms, her heart full and her dreams no longer haunted by the shadows she had left behind. 5 years later, Hazel stood on the front porch of the ranch house, watching as Owen taught their daughter Emma to sit on her first pony. At 8 years old, Matthew was already an accomplished rider, circling his little sister and father with protective pride. From inside the house came the sounds of Owen Quinn, visiting from back east, preparing lunch with Maria's assistance. The ranch had prospered in the years since their marriage. The railroad spur had been completed as planned, making cattle shipments more efficient and profitable. 3 new buildings had been added to the property, a schoolhouse that served both the Quinn children and those of the ranch hands, an expanded bunkhouse for the growing workforce, and a small chapel where the community gathered for worship when weather made the journey to Silver Peak impractical. Edmund Thornton had never returned to Wyoming. Occasional news from Chicago suggested his influence had waned after financial reversals and a scandal involving misappropriated investor funds. Hazel had long since stopped looking over her shoulder, secure in the life she had built. "Mama, Mama." "Look at me," Emma called, her dark curls bouncing beneath the too large hat Owen had placed on her head. At 4 years old, she was fearless and joyful, the perfect complement to her more serious older brother. "I see you, sweetheart," Hazel called back, waving. "You're doing wonderfully." Owen looked up at her voice, his smile as warm and loving as it had been on their wedding day. The years of hard work had added a few lines around his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples, but to Hazel, he grew more handsome with time. As she watched her family, one hand resting unconsciously on her stomach where their third child had just begun to make its presence known, Hazel felt a wave of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This was what true security felt like, not the false protection of wealth or position, but the genuine safety of being loved for exactly who you were. She had been running from her past when she arrived in Silver Peak all those years ago, desperate and alone. But Owen Quinn, a hard-working single father with a ranch to run and a son to raise, had given her something she hadn't even known. She was seeking not just a refuge, but a future, a place to belong, a love that healed rather than harmed. And as her husband guided their daughter's pony toward the house, their son racing ahead to tell his grandmother about Emma's accomplishment, Hazel Quinn stepped forward into the sunshine to meet them, her heart full and her spirit finally, completely at peace.